Sorry about the glare in my glasses. We're just going to have to deal with it. So as you guys can see, this is not my usual setup. I don't know if this video will ever see the light of day because of the obnoxious glare on my glasses, but if I take my glasses off, see like this, I can't see. So anyway, hi, I'm Lady Winchester, and today I'm going to talk about a topic that has been just busting around in my brain for the longest time, and I wanted to share it with you guys just because I find it interesting, and I really think that you guys will find it interesting too. I'll try to insert as many pictures and kind of clips as I can. I'm not sure how to do any of that, but I'm going to do my best. So, with that being said, let's get started. Today, we are going to talk about the Kennedy curse, as you could tell from the title card. So, the Kennedys had it all: money, fame, and good looks, but a dark cloud hung over them. Scandal, medical dramas, and tragedy seemed to follow the family no matter where they went. Is it a curse or a string of bad luck? First, we start where it all began, with the parents. Joseph P. Kennedy Sr. and Rose Fitzgerald Kennedy were married on October 7, 1914, and they had 9 children. Joe Jr., John, Rosemary, Kathleen, Eunice, Patricia, Robert, and Edward. This family produced a President of the United States, a U.S. Attorney General, 4 other members of the United States House of Representatives or Senate, 2 U.S. ambassadors, a lieutenant governor, 3 state legislatures, and 1 mayor. This family didn't play when it came to politics or much else. Joseph Sr. made his money by starting as a bank manager, making him a millionaire by the age of 30. From there, he became a shipbuilder. He dabbled in motion pictures and also the stock market. Rumor has it that he also traded bootleg liquor during Prohibition. Joe was an ambitious man. After he retired in 1929, he started his own career in politics as a contributor to the Democratic Party. He served as chairman of the Securities and Exchange Commission from 1934 to 1935. He then served as a U.S. ambassador to London in 1937 under President Franklin D. Roosevelt. However, he had his eyes on the prize, the presidency of the United States. He uprooted the family and moved them to London shortly after his appointment. What happened to his political aspirations from there? Well, here's the thing. He made remarks in the press saying that Britain was doomed to Nazi conquest and that democracy was over. This didn't sit too well with FDR, and Joe resigned from his position in 1940. With his political hopes in ruins, he returned to his boys, convinced that they would make his dreams come true. Now that we have a little background on the family, I'll tell you where the curse seemed to start. Its first victim was eldest son, Joseph P. Joe Jr. Joe Jr. was supposed to be the golden child. He was a junior officer in the United States Navy and served during World War II. He volunteered for a secret mission that used unmanned, explosive-filled airplanes that were crashed into their targets via radio control. With these planes, they couldn't take off safely on their own, so a crew of 2 would take off in these planes and fly them up to 2,000 feet before parachuting to safety. That is, if all went according to plan. Sadly for Joe Jr., didn't go that way, and 10 minutes before his planned bailout, the explosives prematurely detonated, killing Joe Jr. and his co-pilot. Born July 25, 1915, Joe Jr. was 29 when he died on August 12, 1944. Next to be touched by the curse was Rosemary Kennedy. Rosemary was the oldest daughter in the Kennedy family. Though she was beautiful and had the world at her feet, she faced challenges in her life. She suffered from violent mood swings and seizures. It was later established that she was intellectually disabled. In 1940, when the family returned from England, Rosemary's symptoms became harder and harder to manage, so she was sent to a convent school in Washington, D.C., where she snuck out at night. The nuns thought the worst, that she was involved with men, could contract an STD, or become pregnant. Worried that his daughter's occasionally erratic behavior would bring shame and embarrassment on the family, Joe Sr. was told by doctors that she should have a lobotomy and that it would make her symptoms easier to manage or control. A lobotomy is a procedure where a surgeon cuts away part of the peripheral cortex in the brain. The procedure didn't go well at all and left Rosemary with the mental capacity of a 2-year-old. She couldn't walk or speak intelligibly. Where was her mother during all this, you may ask? Joe didn't tell Rose about the procedure until it had already been done. After the botched lobotomy, Rosemary lived at Craig House, a private psychiatric hospital just outside New York until 1949, when she relocated to Jefferson, Wisconsin, where she lived out the rest of her life. She eventually regained the ability to walk, but did so with a limp, but was never able to speak intelligibly again. She died at the age of 86 on January 7th, 2005, from natural causes. She was the 5th Kennedy child to die, but the first to do so from natural causes. The next Kennedy to be touched by the curse was Kathleen "Kick" Kennedy. Kathleen was pretty cool in her own right. While she was at college after her family left England in 1939, shortly after the outbreak of World War II, she volunteered for the Red Cross in New York. She left school in 1941 and started working at the Times-Herald newspaper in Washington, D.C., where she was a research assistant for the executive editor of the newspaper. She also helped write the article "Did You Happen to See?", which profiled government officials. She decided to rejoin the war effort and volunteered for the Red Cross again, but this time in London. She left for America for London in 1943. Once there, she reconnected with a man she'd previously met in 1939 named William Billy Cavendish, the Marquess of Hartington, which made him Lord Hartington. He was a member of the British Army and at the time was considered England's most eligible bachelor. A total catch, right? Definitely someone Joe Kennedy would approve of his daughter marrying, right? Well, no, not exactly. See, Billy was Anglican and Kathleen was Catholic. That was a big no-no back in the day to marry outside your religion. Kathleen and Billy went against their family's wishes and got married on May 6, 1944. That was the year Kathleen couldn't catch a damn break. Billy was called to action on June 13th, just 4 months after they were married. Her brother died in August, and Billy was tragically killed in combat on September 10th. At Billy's funeral, Kathleen met another member of the British Army named Peter Fitzwilliam, 8th Earl Fitzwilliam. Though he was married and Kathleen was newly widowed, they struck up an affair. Kathleen had every intention of marrying Peter once his divorce was finalized, but of course her family had something to say about that. Her mother, Rose, threatened to disown her and cut her off. Kathleen, however, had made up her mind. On May 13, 1948, Kathleen, her lover, and some of their friends caught a private plane so they could take a trip to Cannes in the south of France. Sadly, they'd never make it, as they, along with everyone on board the plane, were killed in a crash. Kathleen was 28. Next to be touched by the curse was none other than the 35th President of the United States, John F. Kennedy, who honestly, I could do a whole video on, so if that's something you guys want to see, please just let me know. John F. Kennedy married Jacqueline Bouvier on September 12, 1953, and they went on to have 2 children, Caroline and John Jr. Never a healthy man, John F. Kennedy suffered from Addison's disease, back problems due to an old war injury, and chronic venereal disease, most likely contracted through his many affairs that he carried out behind Jackie's back, but I digress. In November of 1963, President Kennedy and Jackie, along with Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson and Second Lady, Lady Bird Johnson, flew on Air Force One down to do a tour of Texas, which included stops in San Antonio, Houston, Fort Worth, and Dallas. This was mainly to boost the response for re-election, as Kennedy and Johnson had barely won the Texas vote in his first election. On November 22nd, President Kennedy, Jackie, Texas Governor John Connally, and his wife Nellie, along with their driver, and the White House detail were driving from Love Field to the Dallas Business and Trade Mart, where the president was going to give another speech. The long motorcade went without an incident. In fact, the president stopped twice to shake hands with some school children and Catholic nuns. At 12:29, just as the motorcade entered Dealey Plaza, unknowingly, many amateur and professional photographers and videographers captured what would be the last moments of the president alive. At 12:30, anywhere from 3 to 8 shots rang out, 2 of the shots hitting President Kennedy in the neck and head. He was rushed to Parkland Memorial Hospital and then pronounced dead at 1 o'clock. He was 46. Next on the curse's radar was Edward Ted Kennedy, who I swear has 9 lives. Ted's first scrape with the curse happened in 1964 when he was involved in a plane crash in an apple orchard. He was pulled from the wreckage and spent months in the hospital recovering from a severe back injury, which would affect him for the rest of his life, a punctured lung, broken ribs, and internal bleeding. Ted's second brush with death occurred in 1969 when he and a friend, Mary Jo Kopechny, were involved in a single car crash that became known as the Chappaquiddick incident. Ted left a party with Mary Jo, allegedly to take her to the ferry landing so she could return to Edgartown, Massachusetts. According to him, he took a wrong turn onto a dirt road that leads to a one-lane bridge. After his car skidded off the bridge into Poca Pond, Ted was able to free himself from the car and swim to safety. He said he made several attempts to rescue Mary Jo but was unable to. From what I was able to determine, Ted swam to shore, went back to the party to get help, and they went to the site of the accident, tried to rescue Mary Jo but couldn't. They all left the scene of the accident without calling the police, and divers were finally able to recover Mary Jo, who is now deceased, at 9 a.m. the following day. Ted called the police at around 10 a.m. on July 19, 1969. 7 days after the incident, Ted was arraigned in Massachusetts, where he pled guilty to the charge of leaving the scene of an accident causing bodily injury. He received a 2-month suspended jail sentence, and his license was suspended for a total of 16 months. Ted eventually died from a malignant brain tumor on August 25, 2009, after being in the U.S. Senate for 47 years. He was 77. Next to be caught in the curse's crosshairs was Robert F. Bobby Kennedy. Bobby Kennedy served as the 64th United States Attorney General from January 1961 to September 1964. As his brother JFK's closest advisor, he served during the Cuban Missile Crisis and took on hot-button issues such as the Civil Rights Movement. He even took on Teamsters President Jimmy Hoffa over corrupt practices in organized labor. After his brother's assassination, he remained in office for several months before leaving to run for the United States Senate. He defeated Republican incumbent Kenneth Keating in New York, and while in office opposed racial discrimination and the U.S.'s involvement in the Vietnam War. He married socialite Ethel Skakel on June 17, 1950, and they went on to have 11 children. In 1968, Bobby became the leading candidate for the Democratic nomination for presidency. Shortly after the California primary, Kennedy addressed his supporters just after midnight on June 5, 1968, in a ballroom at the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles. He was led out of the ballroom and through the kitchen, where he was told there was a shortcut to the waiting room full of press. In a crowded kitchen passageway, Kennedy shook hands with a busboy just as Sirhan opened fire and shot Bobby 3 times, once in the head and twice in the back. He was then rushed to Los Angeles' Central Receiving Hospital and then transferred to the Good Samaritan Hospital. In spite of the doctor's best efforts to remove the bullet and bone fragments from his brain, Robert Francis Kennedy was pronounced dead at 1:44 a.m., nearly 26 hours after he was shot. He was 43 years old. The curse seemed to lay dormant for a number of years until 1984. David Kennedy, son of Bobby and Ethel, was particularly attached to his father and picked up a drug habit shortly after his father's assassination. On April 25, 1984, the staff at the Brazilian Court Hotel went to check on his welfare, only to find him dead from a drug overdose. He was 28 years old. The curse's most infamous victim came next. John F. Kennedy Jr., nicknamed John John by the press. John F. Kennedy Jr. was born to parents John and Jackie on November 25, 1960. He was the youngest and only living son of the couple. 3 days before his 3rd birthday, his father was assassinated. At the funeral, little John was seen saluting his father's casket as it was carried out of St. Matthew's Cathedral. Once his father passed away, his mother moved him and his sister Caroline out of the White House and into the D.C. area of Georgetown for a little while, and then finally relocated the family to a luxury apartment in New York's Upper East Side. In 1968, Jackie married Aristotle Onassis, a Greek shipping tycoon. John's education was mainly in private schools. starting first at St. David's School and moving to the collegiate school. He graduated from the Phillips Academy in Andover, Massachusetts. In 1979, the John F. Kennedy Presidential Library and Museum in Boston was dedicated, and there John made his first major speech by reciting a poem by Stephen Spender called "I Think Continually of Those Who Were Truly Great." John furthered his education by attending Brown University and majoring in American Studies. There he founded a student discussion group and was also initiated into a fraternity. John graduated in 1983 with his bachelor's degree and then promptly took a break. He traveled to India where he met Mother Teresa and spent time at the University of Delhi doing some postgraduate work there. From 1984 to 1986, John worked at the Office of Business Development in New York. In 1988, he became a summer associate at Manat, Phelps, Rothenberg, and Phillips, which is a Los Angeles law firm with strong connections to the Democratic Party. John worked under Charlie Manat, who also happened to be his uncle Ted Kennedy's law school roommate. In 1989, John earned a JD degree from New York University School of Law. He famously failed the bar exam twice and joked that he would take the test until he was 95 or he passed. When he finally did pass, he served as a prosecutor in the Manhattan District Attorney's Office for 4 years and won his first case on August 29, 1991. In summer 1992, John worked as a journalist, commissioned by the New York Times to write about a kayaking expedition where he saved a friend after his kayak capsized. He must have gotten the writing bug because it was then he considered starting a magazine with his friend Michael J. Bierman. This dream was realized in 1995 when he started George Magazine, a politics as lifestyle and fashion magazine. Each issue featured an editor's column and interviews written by John, who believed they could make politics, quote, accessible by covering it in an entertaining and compelling way, unquote. The magazine was first criticized for featuring model Cindy Crawford posed as George Washington in a ruffled shirt and powdered wig. In 1997, George Magazine found itself in a decline. John and his business partner Michael found themselves in a power struggle that eventually made Michael sell his shares in the company. Part of the decline was because John, quote, refused to take risks as an editor, end quote. He routinely turned down interviews with the likes of Princess Diana and John Gotti Jr., and though tempted, he did not follow up on a July 1997 profile of then New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani, in which he was accused of sleeping with his press secretary, a claim that both parties denied. Instead, he wrote about his 3 days with Mother Teresa. In his personal life, John was quite the ladies' man, dating the likes of Brooke Shields, Cindy Crawford, Sarah Jessica Parker, and Daryl Hannah. Ultimately, though, the woman that won his heart was a publicist for Ralph Lauren, Carolyn Bessette. The couple met in 1992 while John was still dating actress Daryl Hannah. They started dating in 1994, got engaged in 1995, and were then married on September 21, 1996, in a super private ceremony on Georgia's Cumberland Island in a tiny wooden chapel. The couple kept the wedding private, however, their lives were anything but. A frequent target of the paparazzi and gossip columns, John and Carolyn battled constant media attention. In fact, when they returned from their honeymoon in Turkey, the couple were greeted by a mass of photographers at their doorstep. The media followed their every move, documenting everything from their nights out to their fights. In 1998, John realized yet another dream of getting his pilot's license, something that had been against his mother Jackie and wife Carolyn's wishes. He took a break from flying after his cousin Michael died in a skiing accident, but when he resumed flying after a 3-month hiatus, there was little Carolyn did to stop him. On July 16, 1999, John, his wife Carolyn, and her sister Lauren were due to fly to Hyannisport, Massachusetts for John's cousin's wedding. The three of them took off in John's Piper Saratoga that he had purchased in 1999. When the plane failed to show up at Martha's Vineyard Airport, it was reported missing. A search was immediately launched, but much to the nation's devastation, 5 days later, on July 21st, 1999, all three bodies were recovered from the Atlantic Ocean. The bodies were autopsied that evening, and it was discovered that all three had died upon impact when the plane crashed into the ocean. John was 38, Carolyn was 33, and Lauren was 35. Other notable deaths from the curse include the following, which I'll briefly summarize. Cara Kennedy, daughter of Ted Kennedy, died from a heart attack while exercising at a Washington, D.C. health club. Mary Richardson Kennedy, who was married to Robert F. Kennedy Jr., died by suicide at the age of 52. Sarosi Rosen Kennedy Hill, I'll put her name on the screen, granddaughter of Robert F. Kennedy, died by an accidental drug overdose at the family compound in Hyannisport. She was 22. Mavie Kennedy McKean, another granddaughter of Robert F. Kennedy, disappeared along with her 8-year-old son Gideon during a short trip in Chesapeake Bay on April 2nd, 2020. Her drowned body was found 4 days later by divers, and Gideon's was found 2 days after his mother. Of the 9 children Joe Sr. and Rose had, none are currently living. Jean Kennedy Smith died of cancer on June 17, 2020. Eunice Kennedy Shriver was admitted to the hospital on August 7, 2009 with an undisclosed illness and died 1 day later. She died 15 days before her brother Ted. Patricia Kennedy Lawford died of pneumonia on September 17, 2006. And that's it, you guys. That is the story of the Kennedy curse. So what'd you think? Let me know your thoughts, your comments, your questions below. I'll do my best to answer everything that I can. I hope you guys found this interesting, because I know I did. So please just let me know what you think, and I'll see you guys for the next video. Bye.